Welcome everyone. Today, it's a great day. It's the third day of the ELT Week Peru 2026, and welcome back to the afternoon sessions. Once again, we'd like to give you a quick reminder that safeguarding is a priority for the British Council. So you are welcome and encouraged to share your comments and questions, making sure that you maintain respectful and positive communication, and remembering not to share any personal or sensitive information. Please note that harmful, violent, or inappropriate comments will not be tolerated, and you can report any concern through the QR code we are sharing now on screen. Our goal is to enrich your teaching practice and provide tools for the betterment of the education in your contexts. Welcome everyone. I see everyone is joining us from YouTube. Now let me introduce our first speaker of this afternoon, Christian Chiroque. He is the head of the ELT department at Turicará School in Piura, Peru, as well as a teacher educator. He holds an MA in TESOL from University College London, the Cambridge Delta qualification, and a BA in education from Universidad de Piura. Christian, welcome. The floor is yours.
All right, so good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's session, and thank you very much for joining me this afternoon. So I'm really happy to be here and to share with you. So my presentation could be about beyond the page, using picture books to inspire language and creativity in young learners. So in today's session, we will explore a little bit what a picture book is and how you can use them in your classroom and the different ways that you can implement them in your own classroom. So let's get started. So we will see, as I said before, why picture books are a powerful tool in the primary EFL classroom. We will then see different ways to turn stories, picture books into language learning experiences for young children. And then we will also reflect on how to adapt these ideas to your own classroom teaching. So thank you very much. I see that loads of people are joining me. Thank you. So let's get started. So let's begin with two questions. Do you use picture books in your classroom? And if so, which ones have you used previously? So I like to invite you to write your answers in the chat box to get started. Okay, yes, hello, and yeah, good. Yeah, pictures according to the topic. Well, thank you, Hersey, for your comment, right? Yes, so remember, if you use picture books in your classroom, and if you have used some of them before, so write them in the chat box. Maybe if you have used in your previous teaching experience, maybe with secondary students. All right, so thank you very much. Well, we will see what a picture book is, and we'll then show you the design of what a picture book looks like, and then you will see some examples of it. So a picture book is a type of literature in which the text, the illustrations, and everything is interconnected. So it's a language resource in which the focus is on the pictures and the words, and the simultaneous displays of these two aspects, the pictures and the words. So it's not just about focusing on what you see on the pictures, but it's also about what the words say about those pictures. So A picture book is a type of children's literature that is widely used in L1 and in English-speaking classrooms, and that's something which is again authentic for children, because this type of literature has not been written, for students who are learning English as a second language. So this is why it's a great resource, which is authentic, and it contains and it relies on this interdependence between pictures and words. So let's have a look at the picture book anatomy, the different sections of a picture book. For example, Murao points out some peritextual features of a picture book that we need to take into account. For example, the front and back covers, the end papers, the half title, the title pages, the dedication, and copyright pages. So I'll show you some examples of them. For example, from this story, Wolf Won Bite by Emily Grabbett, you have the title. We can see the illustrations, which show 3 pigs, and the back cover as well, and the front end paper. So from what you can see here, this already, the story hasn't even started, but you already can see and you already can guess more or less what the story will be about. So that's why, for example, in the English classroom, exploring all of these peritextual features in a picture book is really essential, and it will count towards this language learning experience. Exploring with the students, for example, what the title means, what the illustrations contain, showing them the first front pages, showing them, for example, that the 3 pigs are chasing a wolf, or are trying to chase a wolf in this case. So that will engage the children with this type of literature. For example, you can also see in a picture book that some of them contain a dedication page and a title page as well, which is the first page when you open a picture book. So for example, usually the dedication page is it's when the book has been dedicated to someone else. So it's also a way in which you can engage the children with this type of books, and showing them the title page can also help them to guess what the story will be about. Some examples of picture books are, for example, the books that I've shown you previously, Wolf Won Bite by Emily Grabbett, The Watching Line, which is a beautiful, well-crafted, a flip-flap book related to the topic of clothes and all of that. And also picture book No by Marta Altes, which is a really great example of the interplay between pictures and words. In this story, in the case of No, you have first, on the one hand, you have the story shown by the pictures, and on the other hand, you have the story descripted in the text. So you will see how those 2 things are connect to one another. So these type of picture books are different from other type of literature in the sense that they do not contain graded language. So they are different, for instance, from graded readers, in which the language has been graded, in which the language has been modified for according to the student's level. So you have, for example, graded readers for students for A1 English level, A2 English level, B1. The same with the storybooks. This type of literature is different from this. It's completely different, because these type of books, they haven't been written keeping in mind the children's second language. They have been written for children whose first language is English. So in that sense, they are an authentic type of literature and a great resource that you can use in your classroom. So let's now see the different practical ways in which you can use picture books in your language classroom, in the primary classroom, and how you can integrate them into your everyday lessons. So I will show you a very particular sequence suggested by Morale and Ellis, which contains 3 sections: before the read aloud, during the read aloud, and after the read aloud. So before the read aloud, we can do three different things when it comes to reading aloud a picture book. You can set the ambient. For instance, you can bring some props into the classroom to set a context before the children read the story. It's also essential to explore the different peritextual features in the case of a picture book, and it's good practice if you can discuss the cover and the first pages with the children, with your students. So in that way, the idea is that you can engage them with the story by setting the ambient, by exploring the different peritextual features, by discussing what the cover contains, what the pages show. It's a good way in which you can engage the children with this type of literature. So tell me now in the chat, how do you usually set the ambient before reading a story to your students? How do you usually start when you read a story? I know that most of you have read stories, may have read stories previously in your classroom. So I like to know, how do you usually set the ambient before reading a story to your learners? So I will now look at the chat and I'll see what ideas you come up with. Yeah, okay. Pictures that make students predict the content of the topic. Yeah, that's a good way as well. In the case of picture books, for example, it's kind of easy because you already have the pictures in the book, so that saves you time. You use drawings. Thank you. Yeah, as well. I mean, it's good. It's a good idea if you can, show the children some drawings. You can ask them to draw some things before they read a story. So thanks a lot. All right. Um, Good. So during the read aloud, this idea. You use flashcards. Thank you, Fiorella. With a very nice sense of humor, depending on the students. Thank you, Alexandra. Yes. So there are different ways in which you can engage with the students before reading a story. Now, during the read aloud, this is the most important section when you use a picture book, because you will have the book and that will involve you reading the story aloud to your students. So you need to keep in mind that this type of talk, that when you read the book, it will be a read aloud talk. So that means that you need to use different strategies when you read aloud these picture books. For example, you can ask the children to repeat words or phrases while they're reading. For example, if there is a phrase in the book which is important for them to understand, you can ask them to repeat that several times until they get used to it. You can also ask some questions to predict something about the picture book, maybe what comes next, maybe something that happened in the story. So you can use the strategy of asking questions. You can also use the strategy of clarifying, which means that you might need to say something in a different way and even use Spanish sometimes. Why? Because given that these picture books are authentic text, sometimes they contain language which is a little bit up to the student's current level of English. Um, Sometimes you might need to rephrase what the text says, use different words, explain something perhaps in Spanish so that the children understand the text clearly. And also, of course, it's good practice if you can commentate. That means describing what is happening, modeling being a thoughtful reader. So what does that mean? This means, for example, that when you are in a page, you describe something that you see and you model, and you see something like, oh, look, this is really nice. It's something quite interesting what happened to this character, for example. I will show you now in a different section how you can implement this into your classroom. And another thing that you should keep in mind is to use your eyes, voice, and gesture when you read aloud a picture book to children. So it's different from just reading something aloud, but you need to show, you need to change your voice patterns, you need to use gestures to convey meaning, you need to also make some eye movements to engage the children, when something maybe unexpected is coming from the story. So, for example, this sample page is from the story World Gone By. Um, the text goes like this: I can dress him in a bow, right? So you can ask, for example, the children to repeat that phrase. Ask, I can dress him in a bow. So you show them the bow, you can ask them what color the bow is, and you can, and using, for example, the strategy of clarifying, you can clarify to them what a bow is. You can point to them directly that, that's big bow, something that people wear around their neck. Um, for example, if you want to use the strategy of commentating, you can say, "Oh, I wonder," or I wonder how the world might be feeling," or you can say, "How is the world feeling, and why is he feeling that way?" So he looks a little bit scared, right? While the pigs look very happy. Perhaps they are mocking him. So you can model that. So you can say, look at this. It's a very big bow, isn't it? Right? It's not very usual to use those kind of bows. So that's why, for example, reading aloud a picture book is different from reading just a text aloud. You need to use gestures, your voice to convey the meaning to the children. Um, and then after the read aloud, there are different ways, there are different strategies that you can use. So some of you might be tempted to think that after the read aloud, it's good practice to introduce some comprehension questions, but I would say that you can leave that until the very end, and instead, rather than focusing on just comprehension questions, we can do different activities in which the children connect with the story. So, for example, asking them to do some crafts. Something that I enjoyed really doing with the student is asking them what the favorite part of the story was, doing multisensory activities as well, writing tasks for children in which they can write something after they have read that book. So, for example, I'm going to show you now some examples of something that I've done in my own classroom with my primary students. The first page, this shows the craft that they did from the book Lost and Found by Oliver Jeffers. So this is about a penguin which is lost in a city, and he's trying to go back to the Antarctic, and then he finds a little boy. The story goes on. It's a really nice story about friendship. So in the first picture, for example, my students, they created a boat out of carbon paper, and they painted then the penguin, and then they tried to do this boy with paper material as well. The second example, these are some stick puppets from the story Just Like. This story is about a boy who doesn't like being compared with the other people from the family, and so that's why he's trying to be different from his aunts and from his uncle. So, for example, when the children create this kind of stick puppets, then they can recreate the dialogues using their own words, and then they can show that to the whole classroom to show that they have understood the story, or to repeat, for example, a chunk or a part of the story that has been interesting to them. Another way in which you can do different activities after the read aloud is you can do a writing task, and you can also do different multisensory reading activities. Um, for example, in the case of writing task, in the first picture, the children they wrote about the last time that was sick, and the story that they read was the the Sick Princess. It's a story. It's a very short story about a princess who doesn't like doing chores in her home, and then she gets sick. So you can then connect that topic to the children's experiences, and you can ask them to write, of course with guidance, you can ask them to write something in English. For example, this was a task that I did with third grade children, so they were aged 8, 9 years old, and this is something really interesting that they created around that story. And this is also one of my very recent activities that I've done this summer in January, is to create different multisensory reading stations. So this is a reading station which has been created in a garden, and you can see this. There are some drawings or the pictures from the book that the children have read, which is the story is called "Have You Seen the Crocodile?" And this is the main character, is a crocodile. And then you have the book as well, and also some cautions and a mat. And in this case, for example, once I read the story aloud in the classroom with the children, then I took the children out of the classroom, and then we created different reading sessions around six. There were 6 picture books, and then they sat down on that mat, and then they themselves read the story. So it's a really good way in which the children can interact with the book. They can read the book for themselves as well. So it's something that they enjoy doing, because it's about experiencing the story outside the classroom, and then they can also see the characters of the story being shown in large pictures. So it's something quite interesting and worth doing. Um, so um, so now let's again, tell me please now in the chat or in the comments, what other post read aloud tasks can you think of? I have suggested some, for example, the crafts, the writing tasks, the multisensory activities, making puppets with sticks. So what other kind of read aloud tasks after you read a story can you think of? So I like to read your comments in the chat box. All right, so I think that, yeah. So the question is, what other post read aloud tasks can you think of when you read a story? Um, so maybe you can do some play role, yes, a role play part of the story. Thank you, Pedro. That's something again they really amazing to do with the children. Role plays, that's fine. Yeah, as long as you provide with a simple script or with something that the children can perform, that's really good. Role plays through posters, yeah, that's amazing. I really like the idea of role plays. Change the attitude of one of the characters, yeah, that's also a really fantastic way in which you can then engage with the story after you read it. So mysteries, change the ending, Rocio. Thank you. I like that. I have tried that before, writing a different ending on the story or proposing a different ending. That's something again that the children can do. Stories, poetry, right? Yeah, you can create poetry as well. um, Identifying the characters or doing simulation poems. Yeah, this is something fantastic. I mean, working with poems, that's really amazing. I think that you can use them as well with different types of picture books. So thank you very much. I really like the idea of a role play. So that's something that you can do as well after you read a picture book. So thank you very much for your comments. Now, during the favorite picture book, the favorite part of the story. Yes, thank you. Putting the events in order. That's right. I have try that. Some children are good at drawing, or some of them enjoy drawing. Some of other children don't like drawing very much, but I think that the idea is that they can relate to the story. Create another character to include in the story. Yeah, that's another great idea that the children can do, and they can, perhaps invent a story with that new character as well. So thank you very much. Uh, Acting part of the story in groups. Yeah, that's right. It's same as role play. Thank you. So, where to find ideas for picture books? So, this idea of picture books, they have been widely explored in ELT by Sandy Morao. She's a professor based in Portugal, and she has written extensively about picture books. So, for example, you can find ideas in her blog, Picture Books in ELT. In this blog, you will find loads of ideas about how you can, what picture books are. You can find those picture books for different topics as well. And she also writes some suggestions for you when you use them in your classroom. So I highly recommend that blog. Also, the pplt21.com. It contains also worksheets for free for you to download, and you can also search for different picture books around topics as well. Words and Topics Library.com is also a very recently created website in which they also host ideas for picture books as well. And finally, my favorite one, the Clearly Journal. It's a journal especially for children's literature, and you will find there loads of articles and that also contain teaching ideas and strategies that you can use in your classroom as well. So it's something that I highly recommend visiting, because those are resources where you can find different ideas for you to use in your classroom. So if you really are interested, and I hope that you, after this session, you can maybe go and find a picture book that you may want to try in your primary classroom. So you can visit those websites to find ideas, inspirations, and so on. So, these are some references that I've used. And this is quite an interesting article, Demystifying the Read-aloud by Sandy Marawa and Gail Ellis. And they in this article, you will find different examples of how you can read read a picture book aloud to children, and also picture book object of discovery. And in this book chapter, you will find more theory about the different parts of a picture book. So, thank you very much for listening. I hope that you really get inspired to use picture books in your classroom. It's a really great resource that you can use. I know that sometimes getting a picture book, it's not easy in your context. So there are also online versions of that picture book. You can also buy them online if you want the physical book. So it's really nice. And I hope that you have enjoyed this session, and that after this you can look for more ideas with picture books. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Christian. That was such a great presentation, really full of practical ideas teachers can bring into the classroom, right? So now we'd love to hear from the audience. If any of you have any questions, please write or type your questions in the chat, and I'll read them out for the speaker. While we wait for some questions to come in, I would like to ask a question myself, Christian. I was thinking about what criteria teachers should consider when selecting a picture book, especially for those teachers who's never used picture books before, and for their students whose level of English is quite limited.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, thank you very much for that question. It's a very frequent question that I get asked. So, well, that will depend a lot on your context. So you can choose a picture book, for example, based on the topic that you're working on. For example, if you're in a unit around the topic of clothes, then you can choose a picture book around that topic, the topic of clothes. You can also select a picture book based on the vocabulary set that you're teaching. For example, there are picture books which contain some words related, for example, to natural places or to animals or related to food. So you will also find picture books that contain some key vocabulary words around that topic. I know that some teachers might be a little bit afraid of using picture books, especially when they see that the students' level of English is quite limited. But the first thing that I would say is to try them, because we sometimes we you know uh, we perhaps may not want to challenge our students, but it's a good idea, again, if you can challenge the students with a picture book, and then you see how they react to that. There are also wordless picture books, Giselle, which are picture books that contain only pictures and no words. So, and they show a story, and this is something, again, uh, really engaging for very young learners, for example.
Great. Well, mm, we have congratulations for you in the chat. Excellent presentation. Well, I have another question. So it's about more related to class time, because our reality, mainly in Peru, and in primary, for example, in primary school, we have like 45 minutes, hardly 45 minutes for a lesson, or 20 minutes in a week for an English class. So, sorry, not 20, 90 minutes for English classes in a week. So it's very limited time for the English classes. And I was wondering about the picture activities, no? Because they are very engaging, but I think they also take a lot of time. So how to incorporate these activities while still making time for other learning
Yeah.
goals?
Yes. Well, thank you, Giselle. Yeah. So in that case, for example, depending on your planning, again, you may want to, for example, base your whole unit or your whole, let's say, unit of work around a picture book. So you can start your unit, for example, looking at clothes with the topic, with the book, the washing line. So that's a good, that's a way in which you can introduce the vocabulary while you're also reading the story. So while you read the story first, you're also introducing the vocabulary at the same time. So in that case, you are saving time, because instead of presenting the vocabulary, perhaps with just you know um, isolated words, you show them in the story, and then you can, based on that, then you can work with different activities. Then you can do your usual matching activities, your usual fill in the gap tasks. So my idea would be to start first with the picture book, and then from that you can do also the different activities that you are planning to do. So yeah, I would say so. And because there is also, Giselle, the idea that picture books might take a lot of time, but some of them are very short. They are around 24, 28 pages. So that's so that they're very short in that sense. You can use them in one lesson as well, or you can use them in different lessons. So I would say that, quite the contrary, they save you time when it comes to planning something.
Yes, yes, I can imagine, because it takes because visual is very engaging, and then it makes you participate more, or connect words and even context and make you speak. No, it's very like 360. I think it's nice.
Sure.
We have a question here. Can you share any reference of book or web page to take criteria to assess the reading skill?
Oh, well, when it comes to assessment, the reading skill in this case, I think that picture books are different in the sense that, I mean, you can use them to assess reading skills, but that will take you to a different area, because sometimes when it comes to assessing reading, you usually assess reading according to the student's level. So in that case, the picture books might not be appropriate to assess the reading skill. Instead, you can use the usual short reading texts in course books or in any other type of material. Um, and any references about that, I think that the references that I've shown in the presentation, they can also take you to other references about reading stories and so on.
Thank you. We have another question. Do you have any guidelines to use picture books with young adults or adolescents students? What's been your experience there?
Yes, thank you. That's an interesting question, because again, people might think that picture books are only for very young children or young primary children, but no. Some of them contain topics for young adults and adolescents. So more perhaps abstract topics, like the topic of refugees, for example, the topic about migration. So there are
Climate
also
action.
uh, there are also picture books around those kind of topics. So for those kind of picture books, again, I would suggest the people interested to go into for example, the pplt21.com. There is a specific section around that topic, and you will find also some ideas or guidelines to use picture books with this type of learners, with young adults and adolescents. Well, personally speaking, I have used with children, primary students, and very young learners. But I know that some people have also used them with adolescents as well, and they have worked really well. So I would suggest that you can go and check those kind of websites that I've suggested.
Great. Another question. What strategy can I use if the students haven't taken English in elementary school?
Yeah, very nice question. Really nice. So I would suggest start with a simple picture book, perhaps with a wordless picture book. There is a book which is for children who they have never been exposed to English, which is Orange Bear, Hair Bear by, I think it's Emily Gravett, if I'm not mistaken. And it's a very short picture book around just 4 words: pear, bear, orange, bear. And those, you can also use them to introduce those vocabulary set. And it's a really simple picture book. And the story is really funny. So again, I would suggest start with something really simple, perhaps with a picture book that has very few words, or with a wordless picture books, and start from that.
Great, thank you. Well, we have time for one or two more questions, please. If you, audience, we have another question. What
Yeah.
themes do your students feel more attracted to in terms of picture book, and which do you feel have become outdated?
Well, I wouldn't say that students that some topics have been outdated, because the topics are recurring and they can be recycled. For example, when I work with the students, for example, this year I'm working on the topic of the school life. The students, for example, my students are reading the picture book, Pete the Cat, I think My Rocking School, if I'm not mistaken, the title. So I think that depending, for example, on the age of the students, I think that very young children are still attracted to those simple topics like school, food, animals, chores at home. Those are really interesting topics. But when you, for example, when you select a picture book around that, the story is what makes it interesting, and is the story that makes it really engaging. It's not so much about the theme, but it's about what the story contains and what the story shows. So, for example, I remember that around the topic, for example, of sea animals, I used the picture book Lost and Found by Oliver Jeffers, and the story, it was about friendship. So it's a really nice story containing the vocabulary of animals, of the sea, and so on. But the story is about friendship. So it's really nice as well.
Great and very nice. We have another question. Which of the competences of English subject do you usually emphasize with this kind of activity?
Yes. So yeah, yeah, it's a very usual question again. For example, I emphasize the competence or the skill of speaking when they sorry, the skill of listening, because they have when you read the story aloud, the students have to listen to the story, and they have to show understanding. So I emphasize a lot on listening and on writing as well. Well, especially when we read a book, and after that we do a writing activity. We create, for example, our own story, or we write some sentences around it. So I emphasize those both skills, listening and writing as well. Yeah, yeah.
Great. How can I create my own picture book with recycling my materials?
Yeah, really nice.
Recycle.
You can do that, and I've seen university students doing that, because I also have that. I also teach in a university the module of teaching young students. And for example, the previous time, my students created a picture book around recycling materials. So using cardboard material, they made some drawings around that. They created their own picture books in enlarged pages of cartoon material. So you can do that. You can start with some simple drawings, and then you can think of a story, a sequence of a story that you can also implement that as well. So it's really good. But with the recycled materials, I would suggest that you do it something really big so that the children can see it as well.
And what strategy do you use when you need to teach second and fourth grade at the same year?
Mm, So I think that the question might be perhaps more about the strategy when it comes to using picture books, right? So I would say that, for example, if you teach second grade children and fourth grade children, maybe you can find a topic around those across those grades that is common, and you can use a picture book with both groups. But you will have to vary the activities for the second grade children, and you also have to think for perhaps different and more challenging activities for the fourth grade children. So you can use the same picture book, but you can vary the activities.
Do you consider schools should implement an extra hour of reader plan in order to students can develop more their reading skills?
Yeah, if possible, that could be a great strategy for the schools. Yeah, especially because reading is an essential skill. So
Mm, how can I apply the correct discipline in my classes?
that's a really big question. I would say that will be the topic for a different session, because that's a completely different uh, line. But yeah,
Would be would it be a good idea to teach vocabulary before reading?
Yeah, nice question. Sometimes I would say that you can also pre-teach some vocabulary, but only the vocabulary that you think that students might find difficult. Because if you pre-teach, if you, for example, are going to use a book around the topic of animals, and you pre-teach the vocabulary, of animals, then I would say that might not be kind of appropriate when you read a book around the topic of animals. So maybe you can pre-teach some keywords that the students might find difficult. But if you pre-teach something that the students maybe might find easy to understand in a picture book, I would say that it's not necessary to pre-teach all of the vocabulary, right? Just the ones that you think that students might find difficult.
Great. Well, if there's no more questions, I'm afraid that's all the time we have now. Teachers and teacher educators, so thank you for your active participation throughout the session. And thank you, Christian, for your amazing presentation and your interaction with the audience and your thoughtful answers. Thank you very much. Before we close this session, if you couldn't join us live in previous events, you can visit our YouTube channel at British Council Peru and watch the recordings there. And well, we are going to take a short break, and the next session will begin at 5 p.m. So see you shortly. Thank you. Thank you again, Christian.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's final session of ELT Week Peru. We're very happy that you're here. Now, my name is Martin Diaz, and I'll have the honor of being your facilitator for the day. Are you ready to learn about some collaborative learning? If so, let me introduce you to the amazing Lucia Murillo, which is an educator with over 20 years of experience. She holds a bachelor's degree in education with a minor in secondary English and an MA in education from the University of Essex, and a C2 level Cambridge certificate. Her career includes 10 years of classroom teaching and 12 years in curriculum leadership. She currently serves as a senior curriculum coordinator at Innova Schools Peru, a role she has held for 8 years, and contributed to the launch of the English program at Innova Schools from Colombia. Her professional interests include social interaction in learning, collaborative learning, and data-informed pedagogical decision-making. Please give a warm welcome to Lucia.
Thank you. Thank you very much for such a warm welcome. And thank you to all of you who are joining me today in this amazing session. I would like to start by thanking the British Council for this wonderful opportunity. I think that these spaces are very necessary in the teaching community. So thank you very much. So today we're going to talk about the power of interaction, transforming English learning through collaboration, which is something that really engages me when we talk about education. And this session is going to present several ideas, but I would like to make it as collaborative as possible. So I would thank you for your comments in the comment section all the time. So let's get started. Hello, everyone. Hello, everyone from all over the world, from everywhere, wherever you are. Thank you. I can see that people are joining from Cajamarca and other places from Peru and other parts of Latin America. So thank you so much for being here. All right, so we're going to start with one very specific question that I want to make here. I want to ask you, do you consider yourself a team player? Let's not talk about the educational environment. Let's talk about life. Do you consider yourself a collaborative person, a team player? Can you answer through the chat with a yes or more or less, or sometimes maybe? What do you think? Are you a collaborative person? Yes, no? I can say, yeah, sure. I can see a lot of answers here. Yes, sure, yes. Very good. Thank you. Yeah, I consider myself collaborative as well, a collaborative person. However, sometimes we might think of moments in which being collaborative may seem difficult, right? Yeah, I can see a lot of answers. Thank you. Yeah, sometimes I read over here. Very good. Thanks. So I wanted to think of a situation in which you worked collaboratively in your life. Why did you do it? How did you feel when you were working collaboratively? And how did others feel? Think for a minute. Did you feel well? More or less? It depended. I put a picture here of a family cooking, for example. That is something that I really enjoy doing collaboratively because I think it creates some engagement among the participants. How about you? Can you type any activities that you normally do collaboratively? You feel very well, Paula. Thank you. Great. Yes, it is always important to have a good team. All right. So, yeah, there are several things that we do collaboratively in our lives, but sometimes when we think carefully, it's very difficult to find, and you start thinking, oh no, sometimes I prefer to do some things alone. Cleaning the house, that's amazing, Pedro, thank you. Yes, that's something that we can do collaboratively for sure. Now, let's go to the educational environment. Are you a team player? let's just think about it for a minute. How do you know that you are a team player? There are several ways we can do that, right? Okay, now why am I talking about us as teachers first? Because it is important to model, right? We cannot pretend our students to do something or expect our students to do something if we do not do it ourselves, right? So today's session is going to talk about collaboration, and we're going to analyze it carefully, and we're going to land it to our sessions, okay? We're going to share some ideas on how we can manage collaboration within the classroom. And I have another example here. When I cook with my family, when I prepare a presentation and I share it with my colleagues, wonderful. Yes, that's great. Feedback is amazing, right? So let's see our agenda for today. We're going to see what makes collaboration pedagogically powerful. Can collaboration develop all language skills? That's a question I'm going to drop here for a moment. Are all learners ready for collaboration? Is collaboration worth the effort? And finally, we're going to close with 5 takeaways from the session. Okay, ready to start? So let's take a look at collaboration and let's analyze it a little bit, okay? What makes collaboration pedagogically powerful? There are several studies, right, that debate on some aspects of collaboration, and the greatest authors agree on 5 very important elements that need to be present in all collaboration tasks. And these 5 elements are the ones that follow. Positive interdependence, individual accountability, promotive interaction, dialogic engagement, and teacher intentionality, right? All experts agree that these 5 are the key elements to generate collaboration in a classroom. So we're going to go one by one to understand a little bit more what each of these refers to. And we're also going to see how we can see this in a task in our classroom, because normally the theory sounds wonderful, right? But then the question comes in, yeah, that's wonderful, right? Positive interdependence. What's that exactly? How does it look like when I am designing a task, for example, right? How do I promote interaction in my classroom? And how about teacher intentionality? What does it mean? Right? Which of these 5 is the most important? There are several questions around this. So we're going to go one by one, and we're going to start shredding a little bit what each one means, okay? Let's get started with positive interdependence. And I have selected here a phrase that grabs most of the meaning of this element, which is we need each other to succeed. That is the premise when we talk about positive interdependence. It means that we depend on each other, right? We need each other to accomplish a goal. Now, here on the left, you can see one square, like a box that has a task, a very short task, and I'm going to read it with you. Okay, we're going to use the same task for the 5 elements, but we're going to analyze it differently, okay? So this task says, imagine a perfect day out. Write down 4 ideas to share. Then get in groups of 3 and share your ideas. This sounds like a very normal task for a classroom, right? For an English lesson. Now, I'm going to change it a little bit, all right? Because I want to develop some positive interdependence. So we're going to go to the one on the right. From the first view that you have here, you can see that it has been split into 2 parts, right? You have the task, and then you have a small chart, and you have the name of the students. So we changed it into, imagine a perfect day out. Same thing. Think of one idea that, in your opinion, is necessary to include. All right? So we are focusing the attention of a student into only one idea that is very necessary. We're going to talk about the processes in their minds right now. Now, the next part says, in groups of 3, read the idea of each person and add something else. You all need to agree. Use this table. Now, if you go down and you analyze the table, you have the student, their one idea, this one idea they need to propose, and we add something else. So what you are creating with this instruction is interdependence. It means that you need to read, we have some highlighted words here, right? You need to read what your partners have written, and you have to understand, you have to compare with your own ideas, right? And then you have to add something else. So it's not like, yeah, Piero said that a picnic is a good idea, wonderful. No, I need to add something else. How about having the picnic in the evening? How about taking soda, right? And then we're going to listen to Sandra's idea, and then we're going to listen to Eduardo's idea, and we're going to start adding things. So in the end, my final product is going to have a complement of all the ideas together. Everybody needed to add something. If somebody doesn't do it, we're going to have a gap here, right? That is what positive independence is all about, okay? Now, let's go to the next one. The next one is individual accountability. Now, individual accountability in a premise would be, I am responsible for my part and for the result of the whole task. And I have a bubble, a thinking bubble here that says, if I don't do it, somebody else will, right? If you think that, that is not accountability, but it's how some people may think, right? So if, yeah, I don't care. I mean, I'm not going to do my writing part. We are 4 in the group. Somebody else is going to do it. That is not accountability. Accountability is being responsible for my part. And I know that we can take this from the educational atmosphere into real life, right? We need accountability in many, many parts, especially here when we're talking about collaboration. All right, so we go again on the same task. Let's analyze the same task we had before. It is, imagine a perfect day out. Think of one idea that in your opinion is necessary to include. And in groups of 3, read the idea of each person and add something else. You all need to agree. Use this table. So where can I find, or where can I force accountability a little bit? In this, think of one idea. All right. However, if I tell them to think of one idea, it's like, yeah, I'm going to think about it, and I float around and nothing comes to my mind. But if I land it into a chart like the one we have here, what would happen if Sandra, for example, doesn't do her part, right? That part is going to be in blank, okay? So we are going to be able to see who is not developing this accountability. Now, we can work on philosophy here for a long time, right? Developing accountability is a long process, it's a mindset, right? So this is not going to happen from one day to the next, all right? Or even fortnight. No, I think this takes a long process, but it's something that we need to consider for our students to be able to collaborate efficiently. If we accomplish accountability, we have gained a lot in our classrooms. Now, promotive interaction. And this is about how our tasks can actually force them a little bit, force them without forcing them, naturally forcing them. Let's say it that way, all right? And the premise here would be, I am led to share, discuss, and negotiate my opinion, all right? It's not like I only give my opinion. Yeah, great, share your opinions together, that's wonderful. But if I have these words, think of one idea, right? So I have my idea here in display in front of you. But then we all have to agree. We all have to agree. That means that we have to interact, right? Forcibly. And that is something that has to be present when we talk about collaboration. We have to force this a little bit. Now, promotive interaction. I have to speak to give my point of view. All right. So I have to analyze. This is more about the development of several capacities. All right. It's not only giving my point of view, but I have to be successful in reading and understanding what the task is about, what my partner has written. And I have also to be capable of adding something else. So what we're talking about here is interaction, right? These natural conversations that are going to come up when I put my task here in the classroom. And I have here a saying that I've heard a lot and I particularly love, that is, English is a means, not an end. And I don't know if you agree with me, but we teachers help students acquire a language for them to communicate, right? Not because I want them to memorize a present perfect formula, right? Yeah, it's good if they know it. It's good if they use a great grammar and lots of vocabulary, but if they cannot communicate their ideas, if they cannot exchange their ideas among each other, then we're going to be in some problems, right? Let's remember that when we ask a question about English, we don't say, do you write English, right? Do you read English? You say, what is the question? Can somebody help me? Do you English? What is the gap there? Very nice. Thank you. Yeah, do you speak English? Exactly. Do you speak English? It's because interaction is a need. So promoting interaction is one of the most interesting things and important things here, right? And finally, and probably one of the most important aspects when talking about collaborative tasks or collaboration in the classroom among students is the teacher. The intention that we have when we create a task. And the premise here is I, as a teacher, control and guide students. Tasks need to be carefully prepared. And I want to focus on two words here that might sound a little bit rough, that is control and guide. Let's remember that having control is not controlling students in the classroom, but having backstage control. What does it mean? It means that I am going to design something for them to do with an intention. Everything that happens in my classroom needs to have a clear objective. All right? I know I've been a teacher for a long time, so I know that improvisation sometimes comes up and things happen out of the blue, and that is understandable, and that will always happen, right? But each session that I have with my students needs to have an objective, a clear goal, so I have a path to follow, right? And if I have an objective, I have to design my tasks with intentionality. All right, and I want you to take a look. I'm sure that you have been reading all the bubbles here around the task that we're sharing. Let's read it together, all right? It says, imagine a perfect day out. So this is not by chance. I know that my students love going out, for example. I know them. Every weekend they go out and they have a great time. So, and they come on Monday and they tell me that they went to a park, they went to the zoo. So going out is something important for them. That's why I chose this first line. Think of one idea that you, in your opinion, is necessary to include. Okay. Then in groups of 3, this is not by chance either. All right. I have some notes here, real notes from one of my classrooms in the past. 4 doesn't work for me. This happened in a classroom. If I made groups of 4, I, in the end, had pairs working together, all right? Or I had 3 students and 1 doing nothing. It was more difficult to manage in this particular classroom. That's why I decided for groups of 3, for example, right? Yes, we guide our students in the process of learning. I love that. Thank you, Maria. I want also expanded conversations, not only pairs, all right? I need them to interact in 3s. The next part says, read the idea of each person. Here comes comprehension. I want to check some vocabulary, etc. And add something else. You all need to agree and use this table. So we are going to practice some agreeing and disagreeing prompts and expressions and phrases. So if you see, the whole creation of this task has an objective, a clear one, okay? So these are the 5 elements of collaboration. Possibly the most important one is intentionality, because that's going to spread the whole rest of the other 4 elements. Wonderful. Thank you for bearing with me so far. Now we're going to work with one very interesting question that has been the focus of several discussions. Can collaboration develop all language skills? I'm going to give you some seconds to tell me your opinion in the chat. Do you think collaboration can develop speaking, reading, writing, listening, all of them? What do you think? Yes? No? Not really? Okay. All right. Gisela says not really, not all of them, probably. We're going to see that in a second. Anybody else? Yes, it can help. Exactly. All right. So, yes, Pedro, thank you. Reading circles. Yes, exactly. Yes, we can, we cannot. Definitely, we have crossed opinions here, which is great because this is a topic that normally brings a lot of debate. All right. So, we can develop all skills because there are several tasks for different kind of skills. And I'm going to give you some examples. All right. However, let's think about parts of my session, all right? It's going to depend more than the skill on the kind of task and the objective I have in each of the skills, all right? There are several ways we can develop this. Something else that we have to bear in mind is the part of my session, all right? If you're working with the structure of 3 parts in your class, and you start with the first part collaborative task, second part collaborative task, third part collaborative task, in the end, what you're going to have is super bored or overstressed students because it's going to be too much, right? So can we develop all skills? Probably yes, but we have to be very careful on planning and on intentionality that we saw a moment ago as one of the elements, right? Okay, so I'm going to present some of the skills and some of the tasks that can be used for collaborative purposes in each of the skills, all right? Yes, Percy, thank you. Using short activities or discussions in collaborative tasks, exactly. So for speaking and listening, and these are some that I have personally used, all right? That's why I'm explaining them here because I've had very good results with this. So for speaking and listening, we have information gap tasks, we have problem-solving discussions, and we have role-based tasks with unequal information, which happen to be my personal favorite. And that's why I highlighted it. I've done it thousands of times and it works perfectly. But I must say and warn that it takes a long time and a lot of preparation, but the results are totally worth it. The task would be agree on one final proposal for the school cultural festival, for example. Do not show your card, share your information, ask questions to fill information gaps, negotiate and agree on one final proposal in the next 15 minutes. What happens next? Just to show you very quickly, you are going to give each of the students in the group one of these cards. I'm sure that you have seen this activity, right? So, for example, student 2 has that the students want live music. And student 1 has that the band costs $900. The budget is $2,000. So they start scrolling through all this information and they are going to be forced to interact. So this is something that can work with speaking and listening skills. This is just one very, very short example, all right? Now, when we talk about reading, and there are a lot of experts that say developing reading has to be individual. It's better if students read on their own. And I agree. Depending on your objective, you would decide whether collaborative tasks are the option you want to go for, all right? If it is not, that is wonderful. But if you do want to develop reading collaborative tasks, here are some ideas. And again, I have highlighted one, and I am going to give it as an example. The jigsaw reading. I'm sure that you are familiar with this one. Yes, I can see that you are. Reciprocal teaching. That is predicting, clarifying questions, summarizing things among students themselves. And collaborative annotation. Yes, I have a comment here, very interesting from Kleider, that says the complex is according to the level. Exactly. We're going to talk about this in a moment because it's also important to consider this. Of course, if I have an A2 level student, I'm not going to propose a 2-pages text because I'm going to end hurting his learning process, right? So I have to be very careful with my intentions. So how do you do jigsaw reading? Very simple. You chop the text into 3 parts, for example, and you create your expert groups. How does it work? Divide your students into groups of 3 or 4, depending on the kind of the number of parts that you're going to divide your text into. Every student is going to receive a different text, A, B, or C. Imagine that we're going to make groups of 3, all right? A, B, and C. So first, the student is going to read his text. I receive text A, and I become the expert. After I am the expert, I am going to join other experts from group A. Same topic, and we're going to discuss it, and we're going to make a nice summary. Oral or written, depends on the group. And then they are going to get mixed with students from groups B and C, all right? Here I have a text I've worked with, all right? Text A, text B, and text C. They have different topics, right? And they read, they become super experts, like TED talkers about the topic. And then once they are ready, they're going to switch, and I'm going to get a group of 3 with a student from group A, B, and C. And then they start sharing. This is a jigsaw reading that works very well when you are facing very long texts to read in the classroom, for example, right? You can do it with very short texts as well. It works very, very well. Students have a great time, and so do we teachers, because we see them very, very engaged. Now, writing. Writing is a skill that may seem individual, but can also be done collaboratively. How, Lucia? How can we do that? There is something, somebody mentioned before peer feedback, right? Peer feedback with clear roles, it's amazing, right? Because they interact, it generates interdependence, etc. Collaborative planning before individual writing also works. And the joint construction of text is more complex, but it also gives students a lot of autonomy and a lot of sense of achievement. So what happens first? They brainstorm together for 5 to 7 minutes. They discuss a topic, share ideas, and they agree on some points that I'm going to give them. For example, main message, 2 or 3 key points, 2 examples to support their ideas. And everybody must contribute with 1 idea. 7 minutes, they brainstorm together. Next part, they're going to plan the structure. That's kind of the outlining of this part. 5 minutes in groups. They have to decide what do we set for introduction? How does the body go? What is our conclusion? How will we finish? And we write very brief notes together, all right? We can have roles, right? We can have a person writing, we can have sharing or changing roles meanwhile. And finally, we write the draft. Personally, what I do is I do the first and second part collaboratively, and the third part, I ask them to write one draft each, right? So they are all involved, and I get to see how each of my students is developing their writing skill carefully. Brainstorming is your favorite, Sara Lucia. Wonderful. Yeah, it's very useful. Actually, it saves a lot of time. Some people say, no, I spend too much time in brainstorming now, but if you have all the tools there, then the rest is going to flow very, very smoothly. All right, we're going to include something else, like an extra bonus here when we talk about grammar and vocabulary, all right? When they are dealing with grammar and vocabulary, I know that we can deal with several boring, repetitive tasks, but there are some things that can be collaborative. For example, these concept check discussions. Why is this so important? Because it's going to, this is my favorite, clearly, right? Because it shifts the control or the focus from the teacher explaining to the group, all right? The experts in the group become the ones that are going to hold the conversation. They host the thing in their groups, the leader in the group. Students are going to actively process the meaning because they ask questions. And how does it work? I don't really understand. I do understand. And sometimes we can actually give them the questions and they can sort it out, right? Helps clarifying misconceptions. Here is where we get the common errors in our classrooms. It's a great way to pick up some common errors. It promotes also deeper cognitive engagement because they need to demonstrate, explain something to their peers, all right? And of course, it boosts their confidence because they're not going to be standing in front of a class with a teacher listening, right? So they're among peers and it works very, very well. Really, really promote this because it boosts a lot in them. Now, of course, as we mentioned before, remember the 5 elements. It's very important to have our intentions very, very clear as a teacher when designing groups for a concept check discussion, for example, right? If you feel that your students are not ready, you do not have these wonderful leaders that dominate a topic, then it's better to avoid it or to do it further in the year, for example. Concept check discussions can also land on a product like creating a test for your peers, all right? That is an amazing task. Students enjoy it so much and it helps you a lot, all right? So these have been some of the ideas that I have gathered for you today regarding the skills. Of course, there are several more. And if you have the time during the rest of the session, you can type some of your ideas so we can work collaboratively, all of us together in this wonderful community of teachers here. Now I'm going to raise the next question. And the next question is related to something that somebody has asked or has mentioned a moment ago. Are all learners ready for collaboration? Interesting. Are they? Yes, no, sometimes it depends. Not all of them are ready, of course, right? And there are 3 things that we have to take into account. Sometimes, I would say, you're right. Sometimes they are ready, sometimes they are not. How do I know if they are ready? I have to consider their age. How old are they, right? Now, age is normally not going to put students outside the scope of collaboration, but it's going to twist it a little bit and it's going to give me some tips right, on how to manage collaborative tasks. If I am talking about very young students, exactly, depends on certain situations. If I'm talking about very young students, for example, then my activities need to be very quick, right? The pace has to be very, very, very fast, very active, and they have to get engaged from the very beginning if they are very young. And they have to be very, they cannot be abstract things, right? They have to be very concrete, specific topics. If I'm talking about teenagers, it's different, right? Their attention span is longer. However, they get disengaged overnight. I don't know, they change opinions. I have to be very careful on how I deal with teenagers. For example, what works well with teenagers is to challenge them, right? A challenge is always engaging for them. Another thing I have to take into account is the proficiency level, of course. And somebody was mentioning the length of a text, of course, the length, the complexity, the vocabulary I'm using to create these texts. That's why, yes, not always. If I have pre-A1 students, right? If I have pre-A1 students with very low level of English, and I know that one of the skills is very, very low, it's difficult. It's going to be harder, not impossible, but it's going to take longer. And probably I will need to build some preparation first. I will need to scaffold a lot more than if I have more proficient students, all right? And when I say proficiency, I refer to all the skills, by the way, all right? Be careful. No, we're going to do some speaking. Writing is not important. No. Be very careful because at some point I may ask them to write down their opinions, and then I have to be sure that they are prepared. However, students are more able to do things that we think usually. All right, so let's challenge them a little bit. And the third aspect to take into account is a cultural context. All right, I need to know my group. Who am I dealing with? And not only about the background that they have, but also about the culture that we have in our school, the culture that they have with their family, right? So are they used to talk a lot in the classroom? Is that permitted in their schools? For example, do they need to raise their hand or not? All right. Do they need to copy everything in their notebooks or not? All that is part of a culture in the classroom, right? So I need to consider everything before I make a decision whether to use or not a collaborative task. Now, normally what I see here is something I can gradually, it's like this volume knobs I can twist them to the right, to the left. I balance them a little bit. And once I have my final position, then I start designing the collaborative task. All right, but these are the three aspects that need to be taken into account for sure. So after saying this, after everything we have seen, I'm going to ask you to tell us in the chat, do you think collaborative learning is worth the effort? Would you consider using any of these tasks in your classrooms? Do you think it is worth the effort? Can you type yes or not very convinced maybe, or no, definitely no? Yes, do you think it's worth the effort? Pedro Torres says yes. Maribel says sometimes. Wonderful, wonderful. Maritza Poma says yes as well, and Percy as well. Yes, great. Wonderful. So it is worth the effort. Sometimes we have to measure, all right? We have to take into account a lot of things before we decide to go on collaboration. If we want to make it efficiently, all right? Let's remember that perhaps, yes, I like when we doubt. All right. I think it's wonderful when we're not so sure, because it means that we have to try to know. So I would kindly invite you to try one of these tasks. And also we have to remember that the difference between collaboration and group work. All right, so it's important to consider that. One thing is to work in groups, and the other one is to design a whole collaborative task. Yes, it is worth it, but with a clear purpose, and I wouldn't recommend it in all the classes, every time, all the time, because it takes a lot of time, a lot of effort, and it can actually lead you out of your path, right? If you do it all the time, students get bored. If it's a lot of work, students get tired as well. All right, so we have to balance our classes always. But yes, it is worth it. Why is it worth it to try it? Because it's not something extra. It's something that naturally happens. Interaction is part of our lives. It's a way to maximize speaking time in the classrooms. All right, it's a very nice way. It helps students to get confident. Yes, for sure. It enhances also deeper processing of thinking skills, of abilities, of capabilities as well, right? They start integrating all this development as human beings and students. It improves retention. That is proven, all right? Sato and Bellinger have a study from 2016 in which they have demonstrated that retention is improved and language learning is improved with collaborative tasks. It increases learner autonomy, and this part of autonomy is wonderful because this is how life works after school when they are out in real life, right? They're not going to live in a bubble. They're going to interact. They're going to work together. They have to learn how to negotiate, how to deal with other people with different opinions in the group, right? They have to face a challenge and overcome it together. And finally, it boosts integral development of different skills. I mean, yes, we're developing the language, but we're also helping them become better citizens, become better human beings. We are boosting empathy. We are boosting several things that is going to help them in life, right? My personal opinion is that in the world, we need a lot more collaboration instead of competing against each other. I mean, competition is good, it's great. I'm not going to deny it, but not everything has to be competition, right? Collaboration brings communities together all the time. So I'm going to finish with 5 brief takeaways about collaborative learning. 5 ideas and 1 final closing from me today. And I would like to hear what else you're taking from this session. First, it is important to start with a very clear learning objective. All right. If I don't know where I want to go, there is no way I can design a correct or an efficient and effective collaborative task. Number 2, design interdependence. This is key. If you force them to depend on each other, you are going to achieve it. Assign roles or responsibilities. Yes, that is super important. Who is going to do what, how much time they're going to have. However, this cannot become their main task when they are working with their groups. Yes, responsibility is basic for sure. Plan the language support. Make sure that they have what they need to develop the task. And if they don't, we need to do some work before. Scaffolding is super important, right? Provide them with what they need. But also remember, scaffolds are to be taken away progressively. So I'm not always going to scaffold them. I scaffold them the first time, the second time, and then start pulling it back so they can walk on their own. And building reflection and accountability. Accountability is something so difficult to build, but I know that with these collaborative tasks, we can generate the situations. Language support has to be opportune. Yes, it has to be done in the precise moment, either before or in the moment. If you see that it's not working, sometimes it's better to stop, correct, and they can go on, right? We have to react. We are teachers, we know that. And finally, I wanted to end with this quote that says collaborative learning does not just happen. It needs to be carefully planned. All right, that is a conclusion that I have come to after working with collaboration for several years. All right. Well, thank you so much for having been with me in all this session for these 45 minutes. I know it's Wednesdays in the afternoon, so thank you very much. It's been an honor to be here sharing some very brief ideas that I hope you find useful. You can find me on LinkedIn whenever you want. There's my QR. Thank you so much.
Lucia, thank you so much for everything. This was an amazing presentation. And what do you think about our audience? They were also amazing, interacting with all of your questions. So please, I invite everyone to send us questions through the chat. But in the meantime, I do have one question for you, which is, what's the difference between collaborative and cooperative learning?
Wow, that is an amazing question, Martin. Thank you. And it has created huge debates among the great stars of teaching. Basically, it has the same grounds. However, there is a main component that is not included. Cooperation means that I'm going to do my part in order to achieve a goal. Collaboration has to do more with engagement, how interested I am in the success of every single participant of my group, to say it somehow, of my team, right? It's more integrated. When I collaborate, I'm going to give more of myself into the task, all right? Cooperation, I just give you what you need, right? But I'm not that engaged if it's successful or not. We cooperate, we go towards the same goal, but the engagement level is what makes difference between cooperation and collaboration.
Amazing. I have received another one, which is, is collaborative learning suggested in all parts of a session or not?
Yeah. Well, it can be done in all parts of the session. However, it depends on how the session is structured. Normally, the collaborative task is going to take the longest part of my session. So I should go where I address the main objective, right? If I'm going to focus on a skill, for example, then I should do it in the center of the session. If I do it at the beginning, can also work because it's engaging, but it could take a long time, all right? And if I do it in the end, I probably won't finish it because students may take longer. It's a matter of timing, right? And aiming. What do I want to achieve, basically? Thank you, Martin.
Yeah, actually, Jenny says it depends. She agrees with you.
Yeah, it depends. And I have
another question I have, if it's can collaborative tasks make our sessions too long or too heavy?
Sorry, can you repeat that?
Did you hear me?
No, not really. I didn't catch that.
If can collaborative tasks make our sessions too long or too heavy?
They actually can. They are going to make it longer, definitely. All right. So you have to keep that in mind when you're designing. All right. And the thing is, when students pass from one part to the next, from one task to the next, from one little action to the next, sometimes when we design our sessions, it's like, okay, 2 minutes for discussion and then 3 minutes for writing. But we don't think that between the discussion and the sitting down and writing down takes a couple of minutes extra. So it's always longer than we think, okay? Consider that whenever we are facing the design of a collaborative task. It's very important.
Great.
And if you overuse it, it's going to be too heavy, both for the teacher and for the students. Thank you. Thank you for the questions. I read over here that somebody was asking for recommendations.
Great.
Well,
another question. We have time for more questions.
Yes.
Which I would say Do I need to use a collaborative tasks in every class?
No. The answer is clear. No, we don't. We only use it when it's absolute, when it's necessary. That has to do with teacher intentionality. What is your intention as a teacher, right? Do you want to use it? Do you need it? Yes, that would be it.
Okay. Well, if there are no more questions in the chat, I believe we can close for today. So thank you, Lucia, very much for this. And thank you to all our amazing audience for being here in this session and throughout the day. We thank you very much, and we hope to see you tomorrow for more sessions in this ELT week. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Martin, and thank everybody for joining and for making such a great collaborative session today. Thank you so much.
Bye.